So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about Alberta's water policy. So I work in the water policy branch within the department, and water touches on so much within our department and across Alberta. And Bob's given a really a wonderful picture of the pressures that we feel from a global perspective. And we do feel that urgency, we do feel that pressure, and then how does that translate into the actions that we take and the thoughts that we have within Alberta and how we're developing water policy. I hope to kind of share a bit about that today. I do want to say though, I will have a water policy branch-centric perspective, and because water touches across so many parts, from forestry to agriculture to mitigation and resiliency. I will not be able to touch on all of it, but hope to share a few of the highlights for you today in the short period of time. So what I'll talk about a bit is just some context, background to set us up on as to how we look at water in Alberta. I'll touch through that, weave in some of the water policies that have been developed or we are in the process of developing right now. And then I'll talk a bit about some of the shifts that we've been noticing in policy and planning over the past little while here. And then link it back to research and policy. So that's my plan for today. From a provincial perspective, our provincial strategy is a Water for Life strategy that was established in 2003, so over 12 years ago. And the goals for this span across many interests. So this is the social, environmental, economic lens that we put on environmental policies. So safe, secure drinking water, healthy aquatic ecosystems, reliable quality water supplies for a sustainable economy. So all of those things have to be balanced out when we make decisions about policies and plans and decisions on the ground as well with projects. And the way that we approach and try to deliver these are through key directions, through partnerships, which are so important. And we talked a little bit already about collaborating and working with together as a kind of a water community. And through the Water for Life strategy, we had developed and shared and partnerships through the Alberta Water Council, which is the multi-stakeholder forum that many are probably involved in or have heard about, through WPACs, so Watershed Planning and Advisory Councils, which probably many of you are here today as well, and water stewardship groups as well that have a lot of access and grassroots actions on the ground. Water conservation is a key direction as well that attributes and contributes to our goals, and knowledge and research, which is, I think, probably the key direction, a key highlight that really links the symposium today to the Water for Life strategy. And I wanted to touch on the water conversation. So the Water for Life strategy, as I said, it was in 2003. And since then, there were many engagements and conversations, but not at a big public level. And then 10 years later, in 2013, we did go out and have a large conversation with Albertans across the province about water in general. So we did talk about a few topic areas, so healthy lakes, hydraulic fracturing and water, because we did hear that coming in from a government perspective, a lot of concerns about quality and quantity of water as it related to the new technology of fracking, drinking water and wastewater for sustainable systems, and water management. So those were kind of key categories that we talked about through this conversation, but we were open to hearing any other concerns or topics as well. But that was really the frame. And did a lot of traveling and a lot of conversations with folks, 44 sessions, 20 locations, 11 watersheds. We went to all the different watersheds, and these sessions were also hosted by the WPACs as well, and partnered with them to achieve this. So out of this, there were so many conversations that we heard. We wound up having a summary document that we produced a year later in 2014. And we still use many of these qualitative assessments today in many of the other policies that we develop. And there were a number of actions that came out of it. So from the discussions, there were 20 different actions, and I don't have them all listed here, but it's really just a highlight of some of the ones that we did, that we are working on. So in the category of healthy lakes, there is a policy, a program, a project that is being led by the Alberta Water Council in terms of lake management and lake governance. So looking at what's existing in terms of planning for lakes, and then how we may change or modify government structures as it relates to lake planning. For hydraulic fracturing of water, one of the main policies that we are developing, or we have developed, is the water conservation policy. So this is really to promote the use of alternative water in the fracking process. So instead of using fresh water, looking at other uses, so alternatives or alternatives to groundwater, lower quality groundwater. From a drinking water and wastewater perspective, source water protection was one key element that came up time and time again. So there is a project that is being scoped out by the Water Council, and we will see what that looks like in the short term. And also we continue to look at municipal and sustainability. So, and Bob talked a lot about that, about the cities and ensuring that the systems that we have in place for our municipalities for drinking water and wastewater, which are so key to our survival, is being managed and invested in appropriately. For water management category, conservation again became very key as a topic to review and look at. So for the conservation efficiency and productivity plans, through the Water Council, it continues on to do the good work that it does. Since 2004, they have been having many projects related to conservation, efficiency, productivity, but the latest one that will start up in the new year will be about reviewing that 30% target that was put in place. And it's a stretch target put in place in 2003 through the Water for Life strategy to look at efficiency and productivity and see if it can be improved in all the major water sectors by 30%. So that'll be assessed in the coming project. And also water reuse as well was something that came up time and time again through those water conversation topics. And although it wasn't a topic that was put forward, it was one that came up in multiple scenarios. So we are spending time in investing and working on a reuse policy. It's a reuse and stormwater policy. I'm actually headed to an engagement session right after this to speak with the municipalities about that, to gather information on what is required for a reuse strategy. So we've heard that it is something that people can support and are interested in, but it's really the mechanisms of now how do we make that happen is what we're trying to achieve there. And some other policies in progress that aren't specifically out of the action plan for water conservation, but I did want to just mention them as well, is a wetland implementation work. So a couple of years ago, the policy was approved, and now a lot of work is underway to implement it. And it was implemented in the white area last year, and then it will be implemented in the green area in the following year in June in 2016. So a lot of work with respect to developing criteria and what it means to be a qualified wetland science practitioner. Also, a lot of work on the wetland replacement agents and what that could mean. We also are working with the Alberta Energy Regulator on tailings management. So last year as well, we released the tailings management framework, so in the oil sands area for mineable oil sands. And now it's moving towards a phase where we are implementing and working with the regulator, where they are developing a directive to translate what that policy means onto the ground and how applications could be approved in a way, and what types of things that companies need to submit. Also, what will come out of that too is a water-related portion of tailings management. So what does happen with that excess water that is in the tailings pond? So there's some policy development that is underway right now, and a project will be starting up in the new year. A couple other energy-related projects that are in our shop as well is the bitumen in direct contact with non-saline groundwater and the thermal mobilization of constituents in groundwater, which are the longest titles of policies, but that's why we have these acronyms. But those two are really to enable or to determine what groundwater monitoring, additional groundwater monitoring could be put in place, or requirements to be put in place through the environmental protection and enhancement approvals process to manage and assess effects associated with the heating of bitumen and how it contacts with groundwater. And then also wanted to mention the water quality load management policy that we have that we're developing as well. So it's still internal, and it is really looking at a cumulative effects based way of managing water quality in an area. So looking at constituencies of concern, determining what that maximum allowable load could be into the river, and then determining how the players in an area, that amount of load is allocated amongst the players. So that's, you'll hear probably a bit more about that in the coming year as well. So these are water-related policies, but of course there are so many more that are happening and being developed across the department, whether it be through mitigation or resiliency, or our transboundary group working on items, or fish and wildlife. So this is definitely not an exhaustive list, but just a sample of some things that are in progress or in development right now. Also wanted to bring forward this, the water research and innovation strategy. So back in 2014, when we did release the water conversation results and the summary and the action, an associated piece that was released as well, led by, at the time it was Innovation and Advanced Education, and it's called ARIS, Alberta's Water Research and Innovation Strategy. What it tries to do is bring forward the Water for Life goals and goals at the top there, and overlay it with innovation. So innovation focus. So where are we investing our money in Alberta? And where are we engaging with folks in terms of innovation and water? It looks at innovation platforms. So what kind of infrastructure are we investing in? What types of networks are we developing as well? And also innovation capacity, so professors, education, and the people who are looking at research when it comes to water. What is the ability to mobilize that type of knowledge across the province and globally as well, and then bringing it back into the province? So there are those components within this research and innovation strategy, and a number of actions as well that are established into that document. So if folks are interested, they can take a look at that. And this strategy is the main strategy that is linked to the work that Alberta Innovates in Energy and Environment Solutions does. So you may have heard of their Water Innovation Program. Recently they had requested expressions of interest for water-related projects. And I believe it is closed now, and they're reviewing those right now. But this is really that overarching strategy that guides the work there. And all of those pieces really are to improve policy, practice, product services, and population literacy. I guess we need alliterations for things. There's all those P's. So some of the shifts that I wanted to just share with you that I've noticed in the past little while are a few of them. One is maybe not so recent, but over the past 5 to 8 years, we begin to look at policy management in more of an integrated fashion. So in the past, where it might have been kind of project by project that we look at things, or or incremental change, or managing to adverse effects. That's how we would have looked at projects in the past. But now we're in a scenario where we're having to look at it from a more cumulative or holistic manner. And with the recognition that airsheds, watersheds, landscape, they're not limitless. And so we do have to put some limits onto the actions that we take into our watersheds, airsheds, and landscape, and put limits in place through environmental frameworks to help manage players in the area. And it is based on outcomes that are developed as citizens. So through the land use framework, there's multiple regions that are developed, and where we are now in the South Saskatchewan region, a regional plan has been developed. In the lower Athabasca region, where a lot of the oil sands are happening, that's where a regional plan has been developed as well. But that's really where those outcomes that are developed from a social, environmental, and economic perspective are put forward. So we know what our long-term outcomes are, and then help to manage within that bound, and help to manage within an area as well, because across the province, it's quite different, and we need to be able to manage flexibly depending on where we are in the province and what the priorities are and what people's objectives, outcomes, and goals are in that area. I also wanted to mention too the good governance that comes with integrated management. So over the past few years as well, as we've shifted towards this more cumulative effects basis, we've also structurally changed as well in terms of a government. From an oil and gas perspective, we now have the Alberta Energy Regulator as a regulator. And we also have other regulators within the system as well, but for oil and gas, it's an energy regulator. And now we have moved out to the AMERA, Alberta Environmental Monitoring Evaluation Reporting Agency. So that function has moved out of our departments as well. So we begin to think about these things as focus areas. So monitoring, regulating, policy, and they're separate and deserve that separate focus. But then we also need to be able to integrate and work together on that. And so the past few years have been trying to figure what that really looks like for us. Also, what we've noticed over the past probably 6 months to a year as well, some changing in focus, where before it may have been more of like a sustainable development or allowing for development responsibly. Some of the tone and language in terms of policy development has shifted more towards a growing focus on standards and enforcement, and also protection. So that is a nuance there, and we still are protecting the environment, but it is something that is shifted in some of our language in terms of policy development. And with this new government as well, more meaningful engagement with Aboriginal people has been noticed too. So when we are developing policies, particularly with water, that is top of mind for us, and through the acceptance of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we have to assess how our policies are adhering to the principles of that declaration, and how our future ones will as well. So particularly with drinking water, we are beginning to undertake a project to look at First Nations drinking water and how we can work to help support and improve. So lastly here, just to wrap up, there are so many pieces within policy, and I hope I've been able to just highlight a few and give you a context of what the background we've been coming from. But from a policy development perspective, this is the Government of Alberta's process of how we would develop the policy. And it's very structured, and one line feeds into the next, with issue identification, research and analysis, where this research and collaboration that we are talking about here today feeds into this policy development, then flows into option development, decision-making, implementation, and then evaluation and performance measures. So a very simplistic diagram, but for policy development, what's exciting and interesting about it is it all gets thrown in together, and it's not a very sequential type of a process. Can be quite messy, but I think collaborations like this and opportunities to share knowledge and research to improve the whole water community's knowledge is really helpful for policy development. So inviting folks here today, and also working with stewardship groups, improving education literacy, it really helps with the ultimate changes in policy. So changes in water policy will ultimately help with those challenges that Bob kind of put forward earlier today, to look at it from not just an Alberta perspective, but from a global perspective as well.